Our Hall of Fame is something that we work hard at, and this is something, like I said, we take a lot of pride in, and we're here to honor 5 individuals tonight that were just huge in the history and the fabric of this institution. And very lucky to do that tonight.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to your high school. We're here tonight to welcome the 19th, 20th, 21st, 22nd, and 23rd members of the White River Athletic Hall of Fame to a growing list of the very best that Buckley and White River High School athletics has to offer. So we'd like to extend a very special welcome to the induction class of 2025 and the friends, teammates, coaches, players, and families of Carley Schulte, Charles Lappenbusch, Jan Wolcott, Jim Meyerhoff, and Terry Veltkamp, and those who have joined them here tonight. Before we begin, however, we would like to take a moment to thank our superintendent, Dr. Scott Harrison, and our assistant superintendent, Dr. Heather McMullen, for their unwavering commitment to White River athletics. We'd like to thank our school board for their unwavering commitment to White River athletics. Welcome to the Carbonado School Superintendent, Jesse Sprouse. Thank you to the Enumclaw Courier-Herald for your continued support of high school athletics. And thank you to the Foothills Historic Museum for your support of and cooperation with this Hall of Fame. Thank you to our principal, Cody Mothershed, for all his support. And a very special thank you to the man who sees to it that everything works tonight, from technology to lights and sound, Bob Engelberg. I'd like to ask you to please join me in a round of applause for those whose generous donations allow this Hall of Fame to operate. Svenco Communications, Haugen Dairy, Nielsen Construction, and our individual donors, Ralph and Kathy Bauman, Tony and Linda Anderson, and because he's always supported whatever I was involved in, my own father, John Dorsey. Thank you. Without your help, we could not exist. We'd like to take a moment and recognize any current or past coaches or athletes from either Buckley or White River High Schools who have joined us tonight. Would you please stand and be recognized, current or past? Coaches or players, come on up. I know you're out there. And because we all know it wouldn't be a high school athletic event without cheerleaders, if there are any current or former White River or Buckley High School cheerleaders, would you please stand and be recognized? Ladies and gentlemen, athletics has been a part of this high school since 1905, when the Buckley Mountaineers first began competing in baseball and track. 121 years ago, those kids started a proud tradition that's carried on by the students of White River High School to this day, as every Hornet team in both the fall and winter seasons made the postseason this year. Our spring sports team are building strong playoff runs, and our boys wrestling team won the 3A state championship. Buckley and White River graduates have built a strong tradition of competing at the collegiate level, and we're proud to say that members of the graduating class of 2025 will join them by competing in a variety of sports next year as Hornet athletes continue to excel, and the future for this athletic Hall of Fame looks bright. So let's begin. The White River Athletic Hall of Fame is a 501c3 nonprofit entity, and from the very beginning, we followed all the requirements necessary to maintain that status, which means that, among other things, we wrote a set of bylaws by which we operate. If you look under Section 7 of those bylaws, you'll find the categories that we use for induction. They are individual athletes, coaches, teams, and at-large candidates who have made a significant contribution to athletics. We wrote them like that because we thought these 4 categories would pretty much cover all the bases, and for our first 5 years, they worked out really well for us. For example, our first inductee was John Garnero. He competed in football at track, both here and in college, so he went in as an individual athlete. We dug out some old yearbooks, read a few newspaper articles. There you go. Nice and easy. Coach Trina Page was inducted a few years later. We looked at the banners up on the gym wall, talked to a few of her players, and she went in as the groundbreaking coach that she was. It wasn't that hard, which meant that as a committee, our lives were moving along pretty well because everything was fitting into nice, neat categories. But then we started reading about Charles Lappenbusch, and all of a sudden, our job began to get very complicated because we couldn't figure out what to do with him. You see, we could have brought him in as an athlete for what he did at Buckley High School. In a school year divided into 3 sports seasons, somehow he managed to compete in 4 sports a year. He was a leader on the football team that won 3 straight league championships, and in 1927 was voted by his classmates as both the male athlete and most inspirational player of the year. We could have brought him in for what he did as an athlete at the University of Puget Sound, where he quickly became a standout player on both the football and baseball teams. Or we could have brought him in just for what he did after he transferred to the University of Washington, where he was on several All-American watch lists before emergency surgery cut his season short. He was named the best defensive lineman on the team, and head coach Jimmy Phelan called him the best guard in the Northwest. So he makes it as an individual athlete. Or we could have brought him in for what he did solely as a football coach. After his football career ended early, he was hired by the University of Washington to help coach the line. The next year, he was named head football coach at Lewis and Clark College before Western Washington University hired him as their head football coach when he was just 25 years old. And he held that position for 20 years, becoming the winningest football coach in Western history. Or we could have skipped over his football coaching career entirely and brought him in for what he did coaching basketball, tennis, baseball, or golf at Western. Think about it for a minute. He was the head coach for 5 different sports at the collegiate level, and he was successful in each one. So he makes it in as a coach. The Buckley Mountaineers football team he played on were league champions 3 straight years, and the 1938 team he coached at Western went undefeated, won the conference title, and is still considered the greatest football team in Western history. So he makes it as part of a team. We could have even brought him in for his work as an athletic director because he was the AD at Western for 30 years. Or we could have simply focused in on the books that he wrote and how his strategies and philosophies influenced football and basketball coaches around the country, which would get him in as an at-large candidate. Or we could have saved ourselves a whole lot of work because in 1961, he was inducted into the NAIA Hall of Fame. We could just assume that they knew what they were talking about, so we should just copy what they did and get him into our Hall of Fame as quickly as possible. In the end, we couldn't decide what category he fit best, but by that point, we were all so impressed with him that we really stopped worrying about it and just got to work clearing off a space on the wall for his plaque. So let's dig into this guy a little bit more so you can see why he blew us away. Charles Lappenbusch was born on May 18, 1908, and he grew up on a hops farm near Lake Tapps. 15 years later, he entered Buckley High School, and after sitting out his freshman year, he decided to give football a try. He was apparently a quiet kid, but he was also big, strong, and smart, and he didn't need to be in the spotlight. In other words, he was a perfect offensive lineman. His coach described him as quick to learn, a fighter who was fast on his feet, and a hard tackler who broke the school's lineman chute one day when he hit it too hard in practice. In his 3 years he played for Buckley, the team went 16-4-1. They outscored their opponents by a combined total of 410 to 160. And the team won the league championship every year he played. Besides football, he turned out for basketball, baseball, and track. He only played basketball his senior year, but that team won both the league and district championship, and they were the second team in school history to make the state tournament. In the spring, he turned out for track, where he finished second in the league in the 120-meter high hurdles. Think about this. He was an offensive tackle who finished second in the league in a hurdles race. Yeah, you don't see that every day. Out of 11 schools in the league, track finished a respectable third, and the baseball team won the league championship twice, which gives him 6 league championships, a district championship, and a state tournament appearance. After graduating from Buckley High School in 1927, he headed to the University of Puget Sound and immediately earned a starting position on the Logger offensive line. In the spring, he turned out for the baseball team, where he played catcher and left field, and where he was recognized for his work at the plate. He was at UPS for 2 years, earning recognition as a second-team all-conference guard. After his sophomore year, he decided to transfer to the University of Washington to study education. By the time he arrived in Seattle, he stood 5 feet 10 and weighed 185 pounds, and he earned a starting job for the Huskies, where he established himself on both sides of the ball as one of the best linemen in the conference with a real talent as a pulling guard, earning first-team recognition on the All-Pacific Northwest team from the Associated Press, and that recognition from his head coach as the best defensive lineman on the team, as well as All-American consideration before his season was cut short by emergency surgery. That surgery effectively ended his playing career. But when one door closes, another opens up, because Coach Jimmy Phelan had seen what he was looking for, and he asked Lappenbusch to help coach the Husky offensive line. Turns out, he was good at it. So good that even though he was just 24 years old, he was hired at Lewis and Clark College down in Oregon in 1932 as both director of athletics and head football coach. But 1932 was a tough time to hang on to a job, as the Great Depression hit everyone hard. So when the school had to cut his salary from his position from $2,400 to $500 a year, he had no choice but to look for something else. That's when he heard that Western Washington University was looking for a football coach. So he packed his bags and headed on up to Bellingham, where for the next 42 years he built a career that ended up in the NAIA Hall of Fame. For 20 years, Coach Lappy, as everyone on campus knew him, was the head football coach. He was the head basketball coach for 13 years. He was the tennis coach for 22. He coached baseball for 6 and golf for 2 more. As a basketball coach, he only had 3 losing seasons, and his team earned an invitation to the National Collegiate Tournament in 1942. His tennis teams finished either first or second in conference 7 times, and he had players appear in the NAIA National Tournament twice. He coached golf for 2 seasons, but he won the conference and district championships both years, sent golfers to the national tournament both times, finished 16th in the nation in 1964. Coach Lappy's 81 wins are the most of any football coach at Western history, and the 1938 team he led is the school's only undefeated team. When other teams stuck to the ground game in the 1930s, he opened up his offense as Western became one of the first teams in the country to rely on the passing attack. The 1951 team finished the season ranked 9th in the nation for NAIA schools. 5 times one of his players was selected for All-American recognition. His teams finished as conference champions twice and second place in the conference 7 more times, which means that in his 20 years coaching the Vikings, he finished either first or second in the conference 9 times. When he wasn't coaching, he officiated high school games and wrote books on coaching philosophy, both for football and basketball, and he flew around the country to present ideas at national coaching conferences. Frank Leahy, the head coach at Notre Dame, even used some of Lappenbusch's ideas to help him win 4 national championships with his powerful Irish teams of the 1940s. He taught kinesiology at Western for 42 years, introduced new ways to keep players warm on those cold Bellingham fall days, and he came up with new ways to keep players safe. He never stopped thinking about football. So when World War II forced Western to put the team on hold because so many men were in the military, he headed down the road and helped coach at Bellingham High School. School budgets were tight during those war years, so he drove players to their games in his car. After he passed away, his former high school players gathered in his funeral, and they told stories of how Coach Lappy would draw up plays on the frosty windshield of his car while they were on their way to games. Then, somehow, because it's hard to see how he had the time, he became a tree farmer. Because besides being years ahead of everyone else in football and basketball, he was also ahead of everybody in terms of the environment, and he wanted to be sure there were enough trees for future generations. As a student, he was recognized for his grades in high school. He was honored for having the best grades on the football team at UPS, and at UW, he received his bachelor's and master's degree in education. As a player, he was singled out for postseason recognition in high school, at UPS, and at the University of Washington. In 1961, he was inducted into the NAIA Hall of Fame. In 1976, Western Washington University opened their athletic Hall of Fame, and Charles Lappenbusch was one of the first 7 members inducted into their inaugural class. He was a proud educator, coach, author, environmentalist, and family man. But before all that, he was a Buckley Mountaineer. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the stage his son, Chuck Lappenbusch Jr., to accept the induction for his father, Charles Lappenbusch.
Well, this is really a great honor. I was just the water boy. When I was in the 5th grade, he had me become the water boy, and I was the water boy through my senior year in high school. And there were times when the veterans had come back from the various wars, and I was sitting in the back of the bus, and this young kid learned a bunch of stuff. Anyhow, it's quite an honor on the Lappenbusch family, and we appreciate very much. Thank you.
In 1948, James Wolcott bought a Jeep. As a veteran of World War II, Sergeant Wolcott had seen how Jeeps had taken the Allied forces across Europe, and he had come to realize that these were the best vehicles money could buy. So one day, he headed over to the quartermaster surplus sales at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, and bought himself a war surplus Jeep. His wife Leola had gotten a letter from relatives in Pierce County telling her about good prices on farmland for sale in the foothills of Mount Rainier. So once his retirement papers from the Army were in, the Wolcott family packed their belongings into that Jeep, loaded up their 2 young boys, and left Texas to move to Buckley to buy their piece of the American dream. The family settled into their new home out on Hinkleman Road, and the boys got to work making friends. But eventually, cooler winds began blowing in off the foothills above town, and the Wolcott family quickly discovered that Friday nights are pretty special in Buckley, and they joined everyone in town down at Sheets Field as Jan and his older brother Jim watched the game from the stands and began counting down the days until they could put on the maroon and gold of White River High School. Jim was older, so he got a shot first, but Jan was right behind him, and the instant he could, he signed up to play for the Hornets. In his sophomore season, he and Jim were the starting ends for the football team. In basketball, he played guard, and in the spring, he held down third base. The football and basketball teams worked hard and improved each year, and in Jan's senior year, both finished second in the league, and basketball made the district tournament. But high school always comes to an end, and by the time he graduated in 1959, Jan had earned 9 varsity letters, was selected as team captain for football and basketball, been elected the senior class president, and was even dating the homecoming queen. He received a scholarship to attend St. Martin's University to study sociology and play baseball and basketball, where he became a starting infielder with a good glove and a knack for legging out bunts. By 1965, he had married his homecoming queen, Shirley, and they had a baby on the way. Jan was working at the Rainier School and playing rec league softball when he found himself in a conversation with a man named Jack Johnson one day. Johnson was a sports official, and he offered Wolcott a chance to make $10 to referee 3 football games. For a man with diapers to buy, good money was hard to turn down. So a few nights later, he found himself driving to Tacoma for a meeting of the Western Washington Football Officials Association. He wouldn't leave for 53 years. After football season ended, he just stayed on and began officiating basketball. His schedule quickly turned into working all day, then, once his shift ended, driving out to one high school or another to officiate football games. JV on Monday, Friday nights were spent under the lights. Jan proved so good at this that a few years later he was working college games around the area as well. In the winter, he had at least 2 high school basketball games a week and sometimes 3 college games because he officiated college basketball as well. That meant that for 53 years, Shirley knew that her husband would be spending his evenings at one high school or another, which means the entire Wolcott family had the chance to see a whole lot of football and basketball games. If holding down a full-time job, Officiating games and raising a house full of kids wasn't enough to keep him busy. In 1978, Jan became the assigning secretary and manager for the Washington Officials Association. That meant he was now responsible for scheduling a full set of officials to work every game in the area. He also had to recruit new officials, and then, most importantly, he had to calculate their pay and see to it that everyone got their checks. This wasn't a little bit of work. You see, in high school football, there are 5 different officials who each covered different parts of the game. So he needed to be sure the right guys were at the right fields for both JV and varsity games week after week for 41 years. And never once was a game canceled because officials weren't there. He spent several years scheduling officials for basketball, too. And being an official is hard, because no matter whether you blow your whistle or not, people in the crowd will always disagree. And some of them are more than willing to let their thoughts be known. This hit home for Jan one night as the family drove home from a playoff basketball game when his daughter began to voice her frustrations with the way the crowd had gotten after him all night. Jan saw in her young eyes that she had been impacted, watching a gym full of people letting her father have it all night, and he tried to soothe her feelings by explaining the fans were always going to disagree with some of the calls he had to make. That was just part of the game. That's when she told him she'd pretty much figured that out, because her grandfather had been sitting in the seat next to her, and he'd been booing Jan along with everybody else that night. Now, booing an official is one thing, but by the early 80s, things were getting out of control. And in 1983, Wolcott was asked to testify before the Washington State Legislature about a bill to make it a felony to punch a referee. Because back then, it was just a fine to hit an official. And apparently, there were people out there willing to spend that money. So Wolcott helped protect his fellow officials by tightening up the cost to an out-of-control fan who got carried away at a game. But officiating sports isn't the only way he gave back to his community. One day in 1970, his phone rang. Pierce County Parks and Rec was on the other end of the line, and they wanted to see if he was interested in a job as superintendent of recreation. At this point, Jan had been working with troubled teens at Cascadia Juvenile Diagnostic Center, and he was ready to try something new. So he accepted the job and got to work improving parks and other recreation areas around the county. 15 years later, he was appointed director of Parks and Recreation. That's about the time he heard that a series of railroad tracks were scheduled to be removed along a 25-mile stretch of land running from the Puyallup Valley to the hills above Buckley. As director, Jan suddenly found himself working alongside many others to convert that land into a walking trail for public use. Originally known as the Rails to Trails, today it's the Foothills Trail, and I bet most of us in the room have spent some time on it. But the trail wasn't easy to put into place. There were years of lawsuits, elections, and other obstacles to overcome. So when he wasn't officiating football or basketball games, Jan found himself spending his evenings meeting with citizen groups, private homeowners, and attending city council meetings, where he found plenty of people who both loved and supported the trail, and more than a few who were adamantly opposed to it. But if anyone thought that a man who enjoyed spending his free time inside a gym full of fans with a gift for disagreeing with him could be easily swayed from doing something he believed in, they were in for a surprise. He worked hard on that trail because he believed in it, and today it's a well-utilized public space that helps people get their steps in and spend times outdoors exercising or walking with friends and family. Jan retired from the county in 2005. He retired from officiating basketball in 2017. Then he retired from football, but he made a brief comeback during COVID when a shortage of officials threatened to cancel games. He officiated college sports for 20 years and even spent 5 of those years in the Pac-10 basketball officials apprenticeship program. He was selected to wear the white hat in 3 state football championships. He also worked state championships in basketball and was the head official of the State of Washington Community College football championships as well. And if you think that's enough to fill his time, you're mistaken. Because to this day, Jan Wolcott still plays softball. As a matter of fact, his team just took 2nd place in the 79 to 84-year-old bracket at the World Senior Games in St. George, Utah last year. And we weren't the only group to recognize what he's done for his community. In 1997, the Washington Officials Association recognized him for his work in both football and basketball with their Meritorious Service Award. In 2006, he received the National Football Foundation's Kurt Gegner Community Service Award. The following year, he was enshrined into the Hall of Fame of the Tacoma-Pierce County Baseball Softball Old Timers Association. The Tacoma Athletic Commission enshrined him into their Hall of Fame as a football official in 2010. 2 years later, the National Football Foundation honored him a second time with their Jack Johnson Lifetime Achievement Award. And in 2015, he received the Golden Whistle Award, recognizing his 50 years of service as a football official. All the while, his love for the Hornets has never stopped, because once he stepped away from officiating basketball games, he headed straight to our gym to cheer on his granddaughters, Jane Allen and Lee Audrey, when they put on the maroon and gold at White River High School and played for the girls' basketball team. Jan Wolcott gave back to his high school when he was a student, he gave back to his community as an official, and he gave back to his community as a parks director. Tonight, we have the chance to give back to him. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the White River Athletic Hall of Fame, the man in the white hat, Jan Wolcott.
Thank you, Chris. Very nice. Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. That was quite a build-up. I'm not sure that I deserved all of that, but it was fun to listen to for me and my family. First of all, I'd like to congratulate the other inductees here tonight. I'm sure they feel the same honor that I do, being inducted into the White River High School Hall of Fame. Then I'd also like to thank the committee members for the Hall of Fame group and all the work and effort they put into it. Wasn't that a nice event tonight that they invited us to? Anyway, thank you to them. Especially though, I'd like to thank Chris Gibson, because Chris and I have some history. In 1987, this tall, good-looking young man, size 32 waist, came to my house in Tacoma to recruit my daughter Marcy to play on his select senior girls softball team. So we spent 2 summers driving around the state of Washington enjoying top softball. Now fast forward 30 years later, my 2 granddaughters, Jane Allen and Lee Audrey, you just heard, are playing for Chris and the White River High School senior girls team. So he's right. We liked every game we ever attended, and we still find time to get out here for a game or two. So Chris, thank you for your work with girls sports. We appreciate it. Then I'd like to tell you a little something about my class. I graduated from White River in 1959. Kind of a small class even for that time, only 52 graduates, but actually there are 4 here with me tonight, and I appreciate their attendance. 2 of the people I'd like to just say a word about, if I could. First of all, I'd like to introduce Dave Schulte, who's in the midst here tonight. Dave has given the last 40 years or so of his life improving and making sure the operation of the Washington State Fair in Puyallup is as successful as it is. In fact, David has served the last 25 years on the executive board of directors. So if you're one of the people who like to do the Puyallup every September, Dave Schulte is the guy that has helped make a lot of that possible. Then I'd like to introduce Dick Roney. Dick Roney and I were close friends in high school, roommates in college, and he's still one of my insurance providers. Dick had quite an astounding senior season at White River. He was the elected student body president, homecoming king, starting quarterback on the football team, point guard and co-captain on the basketball team, and perhaps one of White River's best ever left-handed catchers on the baseball team. So I appreciate my classmates being here with me tonight. Then finally, I'd like to introduce some of my family, if you'll abide with me. First of all, it's already been mentioned, but I'd like to introduce the White River High School homecoming queen, In 1961, my wife Shirley, and she's as you heard about the number of games I've worked all my life, she's been known as the most tolerant wife there is. Pretty astounding. We just celebrated our 60th, so it's been a great ride. Then also in the audience tonight is my oldest daughter, Julie, lives in Northern Virginia and came out just for this event, and I appreciate that. My son, Taylor. Taylor is the family senior champion in pickleball. The last time I beat him, he just had turned 14. And then I'd like to introduce my daughter, Marcy. You've already heard her name mentioned. Marcy was a great athlete in high school, and then after high school, she went on to Trinity Western University, where we're told she still holds some scoring records up there. So that's pretty wonderful. But then there's one record that I need to bring up, and in a single season, she had 83 steals. Imagine that. Eat your heart out, Gary Payton, huh? And then, of course, there are other family members, and I'd like to introduce everybody, but I'll leave it at that. And once again, thank you, White River, for this honor.
There comes a time in the life of every wrestler when things aren't going well. This is when they can find themselves in the bottom position, struggling against an opponent who's trying to shove their head through the floor of a gymnasium. It's not a fun place to be. Many wrestlers will begin working on a plan to hit a move and get themselves out of there before it's too late, while others, who don't have quite so much fight in them, may choose as an opportune moment to question why they decided to do this sport in the first place. But then, sometimes there's wrestlers like Jim Meyerhoff who use this time to ask themselves, I wonder how I could dedicate my life to making sure that more kids have the opportunity to enjoy this incredible sport. Now, for the record, Meyerhoff did not find himself in this position very often. He was a three-sport athlete at Puyallup High School, where he was an all-conference football player and district champion wrestler who made the state tournament twice. Combined with his grades, that skill on the mat earned him the very first full-ride wrestling scholarship to the University of Puget Sound. UPS was just starting a wrestling program, and Coach Ray Payne was giving a shoestring budget on which to operate. So he found himself taping several assorted pieces of mat together and setting up practice wherever he could find space inside the field house. Sometimes it was up on the stage, sometimes it was behind the bleachers. But the team worked hard wherever they were, and Jim became a 4-year letterman and 3-year team captain, and was twice selected as the team's most inspirational wrestler. He put together a career record of 52, 10, and 1 at UPS, going 18 and 1 his senior year. And in 1968, Jim Meyerhoff became the first wrestler in UPS history to make the NCAA wrestling tournament. He qualified for the NCAAs again in 1969, but the team still had a little budget problem, and it was time for the postseason. They had a decision to make. Jim and some of his teammates had qualified for the tournament, but the program could either afford to send them back to compete, or they could buy a new wrestling mat. They got a new wrestling mat. But in 1970, he became the second UPS wrestler to make the NCAA tournament when he qualified again. After graduating college, he was hired by the Puyallup School District to teach and coach wrestling at Ballou Junior High. 3 years later, he got the opportunity to become the head wrestling coach at Franklin Pierce High School, where he quickly built that program into a powerhouse that put together a 12-year dual meet record of 107, 65, and 2, finishing as runner-up in the state tournament in 1981, 82, 83, and they took 5th in 84. Under his leadership, Franklin Pierce wrestling team had 26 individual state placers and 5 state champions. Jim coached football, cross country, and softball, and the Cardinals softball team made the state tournament twice. But it turns out that Franklin Pierce isn't the only school in Parkland, and the athletic department of Pacific Lutheran University was paying very close attention to what Meyerhoff was up to across town. So in 1985, they hired him to be their head wrestling coach, and under his 3-year watch, the Lutes produced 4 NAIA All-American wrestlers. By 1990, White River had seen enough, and that's when Keith Banks picked up his phone and went to work convincing him to come to Buckley to become our athletic director. And that's why we're all sitting around talking about a Puyallup Viking tonight. When Jim got to White River, he found a sense of community that was different than anything he'd ever experienced before. There seemed to be people all over town who loved and supported the White River Hornets and were always looking for ways to pitch in and help. He learned that as he was getting ready for his first football game at Sheets Field, and he found there were already people waiting to work the ticket booth, the pass gate, and the chain crew, because they'd been doing it for years. It was the same with basketball. He didn't have to beg people to work the shot clock or keep the book. The community had long since taken care of that. All he had to do was line up the officials and make sure the balls had air in them, because in Buckley, everyone wears maroon and gold. Under his leadership, White River Athletics enjoyed a 6-year run of dominance, winning 19 league championships in 8 different sports. The Hornets won 7 district or regional tournaments and made strong postseason runs in a variety of sports, earning 8 state places. The boys wrestling team won a state championship in 1995, and the cheer team won an academic state championship 3 years later. Now, all of this is impressive, but that's not everything that he was up to. He officiated wrestling at both the high school and collegiate levels for 28 years. He helped found AAU wrestling program in Washington. Then, he began organizing trips for teams and local kids to travel to Japan, Mexico, and China to wrestle. He wrote a book on teaching physical education, began working at the national offices of AAU wrestling. Then, he co-managed a pre-Olympic wrestling tournament in 1983. He even worked the wrestling event in the 1984 Olympics down in Los Angeles. As a matter of fact, he got so involved in wrestling that his wife Phyllis had to pitch in, and she had to help, and she got so involved that she was inducted into the National Wrestling Hall of Fame herself in 2009. Now, talking about the Olympics and National Hall of Fames is fun, but this is a high school Hall of Fame here, so let's bring our focus back to high schools. In the fall of 1988, Jim was one of 6 people with a clear vision for a true state wrestling tournament. This group met and began developing a plan where all classifications would come together inside the Tacoma Dome to hold a state championship. That idea quickly grew into the MAC Classic. Over 18,000 people showed up that first year as wrestlers from around the state gathered under one roof for the state championships. In 2001, Jim took on the role as director of the MAC Classic, which meant he was responsible for a tournament that needed 70 physicians and athletic trainers, 36 referees, over 60 scorers and timers, countless runners, towel tappers, scorekeepers, and table workers all lined up to work it. He had to order all the medals, organize the parade of athletes and cheerleaders, the presentation of the Hall of Fame inductees, and the academic state champions, and if that wasn't enough, he still needed to make sure there were 24 mats lined up so that 896 wrestlers could sort out which of them was the best in the state. But not even all that was enough. Because while all this is certainly impressive, I started this induction speech off by talking about his desire to open up the sport of wrestling to kids who weren't already on the mat. And the guys at the state tournament were already wrestling. So after leaving White River and accepting a position as assistant executive director to WIA, he got to work building girls wrestling and developing the first girls invitational at the state tournament. The first year that invitational was held was in 2004, as 56 girls from 48 different schools made the boys shove their mats over to make room for them on the floor of the Tacoma Dome, and immediately got to work showing everyone what they were capable of. The following year, 109 girls competed. The year after that, it was 160. That was enough for the WIA, and in 2007, they signed the paperwork to officially make Washington the 3rd state in the country to offer girls wrestling as a fully sanctioned sport, and in its first year, over 400 girls competed in wrestling statewide. Today, in the state of Washington, there's almost 4,000 girls competing in wrestling. And Jim Meyerhoff worked hard to make that happen. And just so you know, Jim, the young women of White River have worked hard to thank you for those efforts by more than holding their own against the very best in the state. Since that first girls' state championship was held 18 years ago, the White River Girls Wrestling Program has placed in the top 10 separate times, finishing second twice and winning the state championship in 2020. 43 of our wrestlers have stood on the podium, and 9 of our girls are individual state champions. I reached out to a few of those wrestlers, and I asked them if there was anything they wanted to say to you. They all talked about the lessons they learned, how being a wrestler helped them grow in confidence, and how it taught them that they were capable of doing difficult things. When they were young, they all thought wrestling gave them something to belong to, but then they all grew to find that it gave them a lot more to that. Wrestling gave them a better version of themselves. And they all wanted me to say thank you. Jim Meyerhoff has been honored for his lifetime of work in athletics a multitude of times. In 1982, he was named the 2A Wrestling Coach of the Year and the State Wrestling Coach of the Year. USA Magazine named him as their National Coach of the Year in 1984. In 1986, he was named the NAIA District 1 and 2 Coach of the Year. He was named the West Central District Athletic Director of the Year in both 1997 and in 1998, and he was named the 1998 Nike Athletic Director of the Year. He received the National Interscholastic Athletic Administrators Association Distinguished Service Award in 2004, the National Federation of High Schools Section 8 Criterion Award in 2012, and the WIA's Garrett Giles Award in 2019. He's been inducted into the Hall of Fame for the Washington State Wrestling Coaches, the University of Puget Sound, the Washington State Secondary Athletic Administrators Association, the National Hall of Fame for AAU Wrestling. He's in the Washington Chapter National Wrestling Hall of Fame, the Tacoma-Pierce County Sports Hall of Fame, and the Hall of Fame for the WIA. And tonight, we make it an Elite 8. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the White River Athletic Hall of Fame, 8-time Hall of Famer, Jim Meyerhoff.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to begin by congratulating the other inductees tonight, especially Jan Wolcott, who I worked with many years scheduling football officials, and I had the privilege to teach and or coach his son Taylor and his daughter Marcy at Franklin Pierce High School. Also to Terry Veltkamp, who was the head football coach, assistant girls basketball coach, and track coach during my years at White River High School. Special thanks to Athletic Director Chris Gibson and the Hall of Fame Committee in making tonight special for each of us. I'm not sure if he's here tonight, but committee member Tony Anderson and I would sit at a table at the state basketball games in the Tacoma Dome, and we'd talk about how to get an Athletic Hall of Fame started at White River High School. And here we are tonight celebrating the 6th class of the White River Hall of Fame inductees. Before I start, I need to give special thanks to my principal, lifelong friend, Keith Banks, for bringing me to White River High School. Our friendship began as fellow athletic directors in the league, and when White River had an opening for an athletic director, Keith reached out to me and encouraged me to apply. During my 44 years as a teacher, coach, and athletic administrator, my time at White River High School was not long, just 6 years. But they were 6 very special years. The highlight of my time at White River was the community and the great staff I had the privilege to work with daily. White River High School was my first experience at a high school which was the main focus inside the community. The town of Buckley really knows how to support their school sports and activities. So I want to take a few minutes to recognize some of those community people who made such great contributions to White River High School during my tenure as athletic director. Some of you I'll mention are here with us tonight. Bill Hodder was one of the first people to reach out to me and really help me understand the White River community. Bill also worked as the pass gate at football, wrestling, and basketball events. Then there was Hall of Famer Joe Kolish. He was my softball coach when I started at White River and served as the athletic trainer for football and basketball teams. There are 4 special ladies who always were there to help the events and help anywhere I needed help. I'm not sure if any of them are here tonight, but if they are, thank you so much. But that was Christy Phelps, Diana Fromke, Prue Fetter, and Sharon Gutierrez. Christy, Diana, and Prue, they were the chain crew for my Monday freshman football games, or Monday was the JV game, and the freshman games on Thursday. These three ladies worked the chain crew, and the chain crew was always on the visiting bench side. They took no guff from the visiting teams. The varsity chain crew was a group of school and community members who worked at the home football games. Their leader was Chet Pierce, and along with Chet, there was Jack Bonato, Gary Sambilla, and Dave Wyko. Each spring, Lloyd Livernash would show up in my office with boxes of tennis balls from the high school tennis team from his tennis club. And it was not unusual to come to school on a spring Monday morning to find that the Molden family had brought new cinders for the track and spread them over the weekend. Then there were the Hottos, Jean and Sue, and the Haugans, Bert and Carolyn. They were the leaders of the wrestling parents group. They provided the workers to host the annual December White River High School wrestling tournament, and Jean and Bert were the scorekeeper and scoreboard operator for the home wrestling matches. And if I ever needed to move wrestling mats, all I needed to do was call Bert and Jean. They'd go out, wash off the trailer, so he didn't have stuff left on it, and they'd show up with the truck and trailer ready to move mats, even to the state tournament at the Tacoma Dome. My last two examples demonstrate the team effort of White River staff and community in supporting school athletics and what made my 6 years at White River so special. The first example is when as athletic directors, when we would sit down and develop the league schedules for track and field, I always told the other ADs to only schedule home track meets at White River High School for the last half of the season. Because if you gave us a track meet home during the first half of the season, there was a strong chance the track would be underwater. And that just didn't work. Additionally, we were the only remaining cinder track in the league, and we only had a 6-lane track. My previous experiences in hosting track meets was always a struggle to get enough people to work the track meet, but not at White River High School. We would have over 20 people working the finish line, the field events, announcing, and all the other jobs needed to put on a great track meet. Many of the schools, even some of the best, like Lakes High School and Gig Harbor High School, they loved to run at White River on our cinder track, as they often would have some of their best times of the year on our track meet, and we put on a great meet for the teams. Lastly, who can forget the escort of police and fire departments from the Plateau area who would assemble at the high school and then escort the team bus out of town as they left for the state tournament? I believe that still happens, correct, Chris? Thank you. Community members would be out lining the streets as the team left town with the lights and sirens blaring. That's how a community should support school sports and activities. And that's what made White River so special for me. Again, thank you for this tremendous honor.
$2,800 years ago, in the year 776 BCE, King Ephitos of the ancient Greek city-state of Elis was looking for a way to stop a seemingly endless cycle of wars that ravaged the Greek peninsula. So he traveled to the Oracle of Delphi to seek the counsel of the gods. There, he received a vision for a series of games that would bring together the greatest athletes from all around Greece to see which of them was the fastest and the strongest. So rather than killing each other on the battlefield, they'd race each other, competing for a wreath of olive leaves to be worn around the head of the champion. The games proved so popular that they were held every 4 years thereafter, and to ensure that everyone could focus on them, a truce to any conflict was declared so that tens of thousands of athletes and spectators could travel safely to the ancient city of Olympia to compete or cheer on the athletes. And for around 300 years, everything worked great. The games were held and everyone had fun. But suddenly, They had a serious problem when King Xerxes of Persia invaded Greece with an army of nearly 200,000 soldiers, and Greek leaders, needing to assemble an army to defend their land, struggled to put together the forces they needed because the Olympics were getting ready to start, and so many men were headed to watch them, they couldn't field an army. Now, as much as Americans say we love sports, we've never risked the defense of the nation because people wanted to see how many of their March Madness picks made the Sweet 16. But it does mean the Greeks had a pretty good idea, because most of the events they came up with 2,800 years ago are still around, and you can see them at track and field meets to this day as athletes run, jump, and throw against each other, just like the days of ancient Greece. Now, track and field may not always get the attention that football or basketball does, which is too bad, because it's the only sport where you can see a 300-pound athlete talking to a girl on his team a third of his body weight, because shot putters and sprinters require very different sets of skills. And this variety of speed, power, and explosiveness, bringing together teammates with vastly different athletic abilities to specialize in different events, is part of what makes it such a great sport. But if you pay attention, you'll find mixed in and among the members of those teams a group of athletes who just can't seem to choose one event to focus on, so they do them all. Those athletes compete in the pentathlon and heptathlon. In these competitions, athletes compete in a combination of sprints, jumps, and throws. Then, just for fun, they race each other around the track a couple of times. From 2011 to 2015, Carley McCutchen competed in these events for the track and field team at Montana State University. And that's why we're all sitting around talking about her tonight, because trust me, she was really good at it. But before we get to that, I'd like to talk about what she did as an athlete back in high school, where she led it 3 times in basketball, 4 times in volleyball and track. Then, as a senior, she decided to become a cheerleader as well. So after volleyball practice got out, she grabbed her pom-poms and headed over to cheer practice, because why not? She was recognized with postseason honors in both volleyball and basketball. She helped the basketball team win 2 straight league championships and played in the state tournament. But let's be honest, we're here to talk about track and field. All she did there was set school records in the 100 hurdles, the 300 hurdles, and ran the anchor leg of the 4x200 relay team that set a school record. She was named team captain of the track team her junior and senior season, and is still listed in the top 10 in the record books for White River Track and Field in 6 other categories. By the way, 2 of the records that she set still stand 15 years after she set them. Until around 4 o'clock Thursday afternoon, so did a third. After graduating from White River, Carley packed her bags and headed out to Bozeman, where she signed up for classes at Montana State University. She also decided to see what she could do against some of the best track and field athletes in the country by competing in the pentathlon and heptathlon at the Division I level. Now here's a piece of information that some of you may need to know. In college, there are actually 2 track and field seasons each year. In the winter, they compete indoors with whatever events they can hold inside giant athletic facilities. Then, in the spring, when the weather is nice, they head outside and they keep racing each other. The pentathlon is held inside. For that, they run the 60-meter hurdles, high jump, long jump, they throw the shot put, and finish with an 800-meter run. Since they can do more outside, the heptathlon is held in the spring. So they add 40 meters to the hurdle race, throw in the javelin, and a 200-meter race, and they keep everything else. In both cases, they add together the scores each athlete earns in each event. High score wins. Turns out, Carley's decision to join the track team was a really good one, because by the time her freshman season was over, she had made the Big Sky Conference championships in both the indoor and outdoor seasons, and was honored for her academics by both the university and the Big Sky Conference, which isn't a bad way to start your collegiate career. As a sophomore, she qualified for the Big Sky Championships again in both the indoor and the outdoor seasons, and finished second in the conference in the heptathlon. She was named the team's most improved athlete, and she set the 4th highest overall score in school history in both the pentathlon and the heptathlon. Now, Carley had always been good at sports, but she hadn't always played them. See, back when she was in grade school, she'd tag along with her older brother Josh when he went to basketball practice. Bob Smith was the coach of the 6th grade boys team, and he could see the glint in her eye as she watched from the stands. So one day he came over and asked if she wanted to come practice with the boys. Carley jumped at the chance and immediately fell in love with basketball. But no matter how many times Smith offered to get her a jersey and put her in the game, she'd only practice. She just didn't have the confidence to be out there in a game against the boys. Yet. But Smith had set the hook. He'd set it deep. Because by the next year, she had signed up to play with the 6th grade girls' sting team, and there was no turning back as a world of sports had been opened up to her, and she liked it. But a conflict was brewing inside her between the skills she had and the pressures that could still get to her. This showed up in high school during races she ran slower than she knew she could. In basketball, she always seemed to pick up 2 fouls right away. It got so bad that Coach Gibson used to tell her he was going to drop her off a mile away from where they were playing and make her run to the game just to settle her down. Or at the semifinals round of the state track tournament where she rolled her ankle moments before her race started. But once she was in Bozeman, she wasn't a high school kid anymore. As her times in races got faster and the bar she jumped got higher, Carley gained confidence and began to believe in herself, and she grew to like the feel of winning. So when she was on the podium as a sophomore, receiving her award for 2nd place in the conference, she noticed that the other athletes had begun to look at her differently, because Carley McCutchen had suddenly become somebody that they had to beat. That's when she smelled blood. The next year, she was back on the Big Sky Conference Championship podium in both the indoor and outdoor seasons, was part of the relay team that broke the school record in the 4x4 relay, and she officially established herself as a force to be reckoned with in collegiate track and field when she qualified for the NCAA tournament. I mean, this is all impressive, right? We're talking about setting 3 records in high school and a trip to the podium at the state championships on an injured ankle. Then, as a Division I athlete, placing in the top 10 5 separate times in the Big Sky Conference Championships, an honorable mention NCAA All-American, putting herself in the Montana State University record books in 3 separate events, being honored by her team for her overall improvement as an athlete, then being honored for her grades by the conference and the U.S. Track and Field Cross Country Coaches Association, which is more than enough to get her inducted into this Hall of Fame. But get yourselves ready, folks. I still haven't gotten to the good stuff yet. As a senior, Carley competed in 35 different events during the indoor season, finishing first 18 times and winning the pentathlon every time she competed in it. She put her name in the Montana State record books by placing in the top 10 for high jump, long jump, and on 2 separate occasions in the 4x400 relays. Then, she broke the school record in the 60 hurdles. Not only did she break the school record in the pentathlon, but by becoming the first woman in Big Sky Conference history to score over 4,000 points in that event, she broke the record for the conference as well. Carley was named the most outstanding female athlete at the Big Sky Indoor Championships, won the conference championships in the pentathlon, and was named her team's MVP. And if that wasn't enough, she was also named the Big Sky All-Academic Team and was named as an Academic All-American. Now, would you like to hear what she did in the outdoor season? Because everything I just told you, she did that in the winter season. Carley competed in 43 different events during the outdoor season as a senior, and she took first 15 times. She posted results that are still listed in Montana State's top 10s in the 200-meter sprint, the 100 hurdles, and the long jump. She was named Big Sky Athlete of the Week not once, but twice. Not only did she set the record at Montana State University in the heptathlon, but that score still stands as the 9th highest in Big Sky Conference history a full decade after she did it. She was on the relay team that broke the school record in the 4x4, and that time still stands as the 2nd fastest in school history a decade later. She was named to the Dean's List and the President's List every semester she was in college as a mechanical engineering major. She was named to the Big Sky All-Academic Team, and she won the conference championship in the heptathlon. One more. Did you know that at the end of every school year, the senior class at White River High School comes together to vote on a series of awards, and the members of her graduating class voted Carley McCutchen as the 2010 Senior Athlete of the Year. But then she headed off to college, where it turns out that Montana State University does the same thing, when they gather all the athletes who competed in any sport for the Bobcats to vote on a series of awards. And the female Bobcat athletes who competed in every sport that year voted Carley McCutchen as the Montana State University's 2015 Female Student Athlete of the Year. And that's not too bad for a girl from Buckley. Today, Carley and her husband Colin live in Bonnie Lake with their 2 young daughters, Rory and Scotty, where there is no doubt that her speed and ability to hurdle any object in her way will really come in handy as she and Colin raise those 2 little girls. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the White River Athletic Hall of Fame, 2-time conference champion and the first woman in Big Sky history to score 4,000 points in the pentathlon, Carley McCutchen Schulte.
Thank you, everyone. Wow. If I ever need someone to talk about me, I'm definitely going to hire Mr. Dorsey. Thank you, everyone, for the wonderful event. It has been more than I ever could have imagined. And I know all the work that comes into creating something like this. So thank you so much to everyone who is involved in it. And thank you to everyone who's here tonight. So many of you have been a part of my journey, both as an athlete and just growing up and all my adult life as well. So sharing this moment with you all is fantastic. Although most of these accomplishments that I'm being recognized for here tonight are from my time at Montana State, it all started with a foundation that was built here in Buckley and at White River. And I can't thank you all enough for that. From my family, the coaches, and the friends that I created here in Buckley. It is not lost on me on how big a role support systems can play in a person's success, and mine is absolutely no exception. I've said it countless times and I'll keep saying it, I'm lucky beyond measure to have the people and the quality of people in my life. From my mom, who is no longer with us, who worked multiple jobs so I could do what I love, my dad and my stepmom, who spent countless weekends in bleachers from 7th grade AAU basketball all the way to spring track in Bozeman. And if anyone knows spring in Bozeman, that is snow and negative degrees outside. So they really persevered to watch me play at all levels. My brother, for helping me, he probably watched more girls basketball than he ever cared to in his entire life. And then also taking me to all of my practices and sometimes forgetting me at those practices. I do remember that, so. My whole family, extended family included, made so many sacrifices for my dream that as a kid, I didn't fully understand or appreciate. I am immensely grateful and would not have achieved these dreams without them. To some of the best coaches in White River history, Coach Gibb, Coach V, you guys helped change me. I was just a shy, scared little 6th grader. I think every coach at White River at one point in time has seen me cry. So thank you for shaping me and challenging me and pushing me well. Most importantly, deeply caring about me as a person. And that is definitely what made me so emotional whenever I missed a basket or got a ticky-tack foul too many times. Gib, the effort it takes to create a standout program year after year doesn't happen by chance. And that discipline was an incredible foundation as I stepped into the next level of sports, where you don't just win because you're more athletic. Coach V, I'm so happy that I get to do this induction with you here. I think you were I told you about it earlier, but just when my freshman year, I got to swing JV and varsity, and Coach V was the JV coach. His expectations were obviously pretty high for an athlete that was swinging varsity. So I got yelled at a fair bit. And I knew it came from a place of a good place. But when I was on the bench with Gib, he was my buffer. I remember vividly when I would get pulled out from the game because Gib didn't like something that I did. And he would point to V and say, "Go get her. Go talk to her." So Coach V was also my buffer. Made it soften the blow of Gib a couple times. So thank you. Also my track coaches, Coach Scheidt, Coach Marlowe, Coach Allen Hall. I don't know if he's here tonight, but thank you all for pushing me. One of my first stories of being at high school track, one of my friends convinced me to do the 800, and Mr. Marlowe was the coach. And my friend convinced me that on long runs you could take breaks whenever you wanted. Well, the next day at practice, Coach Marlowe gave a pretty stern lecture on if you don't want to run, then you shouldn't be a long distance runner. That was one, how I very quickly found my way out of long distance, but two, a very good eye-opener that there are certain people you shouldn't listen to. So I appreciate that, but Mr. Marlowe, I also don't regret never doing cross country, so. But yes, thank you all for pushing me out of my comfort zone to try new events. Without it, I never would have found the heptathlon, so I think it paid off. And as a parent now, myself, I also want to acknowledge how much these coaches are sacrificing to give back to these kids. It is unbelievable the commitment it takes to run these programs, and I'm forever grateful to my coaches and the coaches that will someday coach our girls. Then to the best possible group of friends and teammates, your high school years are so pivotal to how you're going to grow. And anyone who knows the class of 2010 knows what I'm talking about and who I'm talking about. The kind of friends that could also pass as each other's #1 fans at any given time. Just genuinely good people, friends rooting for friends. And I am so grateful and thankful for that, that is who I was able to surround myself with in these pivotal years of high school and to set me up to achieve greatness later. The memories that I made here at White River and while at Montana State are some that will stay with me forever. The feeling of giving something everything you have and to come away with records is an incredible experience and one that can truly change the trajectory of your life. At least that's how it felt for me. The obstacles you face in life feel a little bit more manageable because you know what it takes to go through the trenches, the work, and come out on top. The mindset you carry with you into every aspect of life, it just changes you. And I say that because records will fade, but the memories, the mindset, and the way you carry yourself will last forever. I've had the privilege of seeing multiple of my records fall in the last few months, and I truly say that it is a privilege. I am so excited for these young women to have these experiences. I wish I could give this experience, the feeling, the joy, the mindset change to every single young athlete. When Wayne Gretzky's scoring record fell just a few weeks ago, a quote circled around from his father that said something to the effect of, "Have just as much respect to the next guy who breaks your record." But I want to take it a step farther and say you should have just as much joy in your heart for the next athlete as you did the day that you broke that record. Because now they get to have that life-changing moment. That moment will be with me forever, the feeling that I had when I got those, and I hope that they get to have that feeling, the life-changing moment themselves. I hope it helps these young ladies fight harder in challenging moments, stand up taller for things they believe in, and chase higher dreams than they ever thought possible. Thank you all for being here tonight. Thank you for the committee who puts this on. And thank you all for supporting me through all my phases of my sporting career. And lastly, a huge thank you to my husband, who is now my biggest supporter as we tackled this next phase of life with raising our 2 daughters. So, thank you.
1985, Valley Christian Crusaders came along and matched it. Would you like to know who the defensive coordinator was for Valley Christian High School in 1985? Those 10 shutouts are a good story, and I'm going to get to it. But I've got some other stories to tell first, because that's the thing I found out about Terry Veltkamp as I was working on this. There's a lot of stories about him out there. As a matter of fact, it seems like everyone in Buckley has a good story about V. I've got one. His former students can all tell a few. I talked to some of his former players. They certainly had some. So did the guys he coached with and the people who taught with him. I even have his granddaughter in class. She's got some good ones. As a matter of fact, let's bring the lights up for a minute, because I want you to raise your hand if you've got a good story about Coach V. Here's the thing, I'm not surprised by that, and I'm going to guess that most of you aren't either. Like the rest of the inductees tonight, Terry was voted into the Hall of Fame in November. Since then, I've gone out of my way to talk to people about him to get ready for tonight, which means that I've heard a lot of Terry Veltkamp stories. And they all have a few things in common. At some point in every story about Terry, he's yelling. They usually describe the moment when the veins in his neck started popping out. And the moral of every story I heard about him was this: that he cared, and he just wanted to make someone better. So let's tell some stories about him. Terry Veltkamp went to high school at Linden Christian. Although the school had been around since 1910, the Lynx had only been playing football for a couple of years by the time he got there. You see, they only had about 400 kids in the high school, and half of them were girls. So although they played basketball and baseball and track in the Whatcom County League, they didn't really have the numbers for a football team. But the league cracked down and threatened to kick them out if they didn't put together a football team, so the school reached out to, of all people, Charles Lappenbusch at Western Washington University, because he was the athletic director. They asked for a donation of old pads and helmets that they were no longer using. Then they simply told a bunch of the boys they were playing football and started practicing. That meant that 5 years later, when a 14-year-old kid named Terry Veltkamp walked into the office of Linden Christian High School and asked for the football sign-up sheet, the school had a team. And that's where tonight's Terry Veltkamp story begins. Terry became a 3-sport athlete in high school. He played tailback and linebacker on the football team, where he placed near the top of the league in scoring his senior year. And not only did the Lynx give up the fewest points in the league that year, but Terry was named the Whatcom County League Defensive Player of the Year. He played forward on the basketball team and helped the Lynx reach the state tournament in both his junior and senior years. As a track athlete, he ran some sprints and did the long jump. Then he got it into his head that he wanted to pole vault. Linden Christian didn't have the facilities for a pole vault, so he had to practice that on his own. He ended up headed out to his backyard. He stuck a couple of sticks in the ground and he strung a line in between them. Then he found a bamboo tube he could use as his pole, headed to the other side of the yard and took a running start at his makeshift pole vault pit and launched himself up and over the line, which was fine on the way up. But once he was in the air, he didn't have any pads below him. So he just grit his teeth and crashed into the ground. Then he picked himself back up again, headed over to the other side of the yard to do it all over again. After high school, he enrolled at Olympic College and tried out for the football team. But he got mono during tryouts, which pretty much meant college football was out of the question that year. So he left school, picked up his tool belt, and went to work on a construction crew. He married his high school sweetheart in 1974 and settled into his new life with Barbara. Although he liked the work, as the young guy on the crew, he couldn't fail to notice that every crap job that needed to be done seemed to have his name on it. And one day when he was digging a ditch for a pipe, he finally got fed up. So he called in sick the next day and drove down to the campus of Western Washington University and enrolled. Then he tried to figure out how he was going to tell Barbara he also wanted to play football. He played linebacker that first year and got about half the defensive snaps. But when his sophomore year started up and he headed off for the first day of practice with the linebackers, he noticed pretty quickly there's about 30 guys with him. And on the other side of the field, there was just 3 playing tight end. So after practice, he went to Coach Boyd Long and said, "Coach, I think I'm a tight end." He made the move and started there for the Vikings for the next 3 seasons. Because he had sat out a few years while he worked construction, he was the oldest player on the team, and he became someone who could be a real voice of reason in the locker room and a great example for his teammates. But football finally comes to an end for everyone, and in 1977 he hung up his gear for the last time. He knew he'd missed playing, but it was time to get to work. That's when he got a call from a friend of his who was teaching just outside Los Angeles at Valley Christian High School, because Valley Christian needed a shop teacher. Next thing they knew, Terry and Barbara called California home for 9 years, as Terry taught shop and coached 3 sports, and they raised their 3 kids, Jace, Pat, and Jackie, in the California sunshine. In his time at Valley Christian, he helped the Crusaders win 14 different league championships in football, basketball, and track, and 3 CIF championships. But 1985 was special because Valley Christian was loaded. And with Terry as defensive coordinator, the football team set out to attack the offense. And for 10 weeks, that's exactly what they did, as the Crusaders shut out one opponent after another by an average score of 43-0, tying the Lowell Cardinals in their 47-year-old California high school record with 10 shutouts in a 13-game season and made the state quarterfinals. And in case you're wondering, Terry, I took a look. That record still stands. But even with the success they were having at Valley Christian, Terry and Barbara were ready to leave California behind and move back home. So they packed their things and headed back up to Linden, where Terry got a job in construction and volunteered with the Linden Christian football team, helping them make it to the state championship game in 1986. But teaching was in his heart, and in 1987, White River needed a shop teacher. So once again, the Veltkamps packed their things and moved to Buckley. Terry brought the same passion, energy, and competitiveness to White River that he brought to the Lynx, the Vikings, and the Crusaders. It was the only way he knew how football could be played. He'd head out to practice every day, point to a backstop across the field, and tell them all to take a tour, and off they'd go on a warm-up lap. His players figured out pretty quick, as they learned how to use his mustache to read his mood before he blew up. If he was fiddling with it or it was flaring out, they knew he wasn't happy with how things were going, and they'd better get it fixed real quick before the veins in his neck made an appearance. He was the JV girls basketball coach too, and although he didn't yell at the girls nearly as much as he did the boys, everyone learned they didn't need the scoreboard to tell how the game was going. You just had to look at Terry. If he still had his jacket on and his necktie tied, they were winning comfortably. If the jacket had come off, the game was starting to get close. If he had loosened his necktie, it was tight game. And if the tie had also come off, they were getting blown out. Since football coaches don't wear neckties and they're usually fired up anyway, you couldn't use that same method. But Hornet fans still didn't need the scoreboard. If V still had his headset on, things were fine. If it was lying behind him on the bench broken, it was best not to look at the scoreboard. But in all fairness, every head football coach I've ever known has broken a few headsets. It's just part of the job. But overall, the Hornets won a lot of football games under Terry Veltkamp. He led the team for 10 years, and they won the league title 5 times. He was named Pierce County League Coach of the Year in 1991, 1994, and 1998. He won a lot of big games, but arguably the biggest win in White River football history came under his watch on a cold November night in 1998 under the shadow of the Space Needle in Seattle's Memorial Stadium. The Hornets earned the right to play in that game by knocking off the defending state champions. That win over Lakes gave them the league championship and the top seed into the playoffs for a game against the Fighting Irish of O'Day High School. O'Day was a powerhouse that had won 10 of the last 11 Metro League championships and 3 of the last 7 state championships. They hadn't been shut out of a game the entire decade of the 90s. Their senior class had a win-loss record of 44-2. And their defense had only given up 15 points all season. And if that wasn't enough, they had future NFL wide receiver Nate Burleson also playing for them. But late in the fourth, with the game tied 0-0, White River forced O'Day to punt from deep in their own end. And when the punter bobbled a low snap, the ball got away from him, allowing the Hornets to take possession on the O'Day 17-yard line. Suddenly, Terry Veltkamp had a decision to make. As he stood there looking over his play sheet, his assistant coach, Jim Engstrom, walked up to him and said, "If you're ever going to run it, now's the time." Veltkamp looked at him, knew he was right, and with that jaw set firm as only he could do it, he sent in the play. Robot right. This called for an unbalanced formation, where both offensive tackles line up next to each other on the same side of the center. And the tight end lines up next to the left guard. This is to overload the strength to one side of the offensive line. The catch is that it brings one of the defensive ends closer to the quarterback. You see, Veltkamp had been calling running plays all night, and it was working. They were gaining more yards than O'Day was used to giving up, so the Irish had loaded the line of scrimmage to stop the run. When they saw the overload formation, they weren't fooled, and they came up hard expecting student body right. At least they thought they weren't fooled. As the ball was snapped, O'Day's defensive line slanted towards those two tackles, expecting tight end Todd Jensen to stay in and block the defensive end on the backside. But he didn't. And instead of knocking him off his pass route like he's supposed to, that end came in hard, racing towards quarterback Pat Veltkamp, who had just enough time to find Jensen wide open in the end zone for the winning score of an unforgettable game. That game is one of 1,000 great stories I could have told you tonight, because a high school sports season is always filled with memories that make for great stories. Whether it's a key moment of a playoff game or a much quieter one out on the practice field, those stories are a big part of why we all remember high school sports so much. And they're why Terry's players had so many stories to tell me. When he was 25 years old, playing in his final season at Western, the local newspaper wrote this story. Veltkamp plays the role as the forgotten man. But I have a problem with that article, because I just spent the past few months talking to a lot of people about the man the Bellingham Herald called forgotten. And the one thing I learned was this: Terry Veltkamp isn't forgotten by anybody in Buckley. Terry, the kids who played for you and took your classes all remembered, because they all told me great stories. And the moral of every one was that you wanted to make them better. And even though they know they made you mad, you did what you set out to do. You made them better people. And now, with your plaque forever displayed in this Hall of Fame, nobody will ever forget you. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the White River Athletic Hall of Fame, Coach Terry Veltkamp.
I stand up here very humbled. Of course, there's a lot of thanks that goes out. Thanks to the committee and all that. Thanks to my family. A lot of them are here tonight. Thanks to a lot of people in the crowd that I coached and taught. I think, as I was listening to the other speeches, and I was sitting down there and I was thinking, yeah, what they said. So I wouldn't have to say too much. But there's one thing that we've just got to get straight. I coached a lot of years, and I was pretty passionate, and I got after a few kids. And everybody talks about this vein sticking out in my neck. Well, I've never seen that. So I just don't get it. I had a passion for the game, all the games that I played. I loved them all. I loved competing. I loved watching kids and students compete. I loved to watch them in my classroom make stuff that they didn't think they could make, and they ended up with. And it was one of those things where you wanted to be with the kids all the time. I was lucky enough to be with my kids. They were water boys and water girls, and I coached all three of them in different sports. And that was a joy. I got to coach with one who helped me coach with Gibson for about, 4 or 5 years. She helped out, and that was a blessing. And then all the coaches I got to coach with, I think as I had a pretty good run as a head football coach, but I think I really enjoyed coaching under other coaches more. A lot of good people with a lot of good direction for kids, and I learned a lot from a lot of them, and it was just a joy to have them and being able to work with people like that here at White River. I spent most of my time here, 30 years. And I think I'd probably do it all over again. So I thank my coaches that coached for me, and I thank the coaches that I coached underneath, and I thank the student athletes as students that I had in my class, and the athletes that I had off the field. It was just a joy to be around them all. And I thank you so much for this honor.
On behalf of the members of the White River Athletic Hall of Fame Committee, thank you all for coming tonight. If you didn't have a chance to see any of the new plaques of our inductees, we invite you to head over to the gym afterwards and take a look. But before we'd like to go, we'd like your help with a couple of things. This Hall of Fame can only exist through the generous donations of our supporters and sponsors. It's how we pay for the reception beforehand, the programs you received, and the plaques of our inductees that we hung in the gym foyer. If you'd like to support the White River Athletic Hall of Fame with a financial donation, you can bring a check to the high school or visit our website and contribute online. Everything you need to donate can be found in your program. We need these donations to continue providing nights like tonight. Second, it's really difficult gathering the artifacts that we use to decorate tonight, such as the original books written by Coach Lappenbusch, the 1950s football stat books, and Carley's javelin. So to cut to the chase, I'm shamelessly asking you for your stuff, because we're always on the search for additional memorabilia from our school's athletic past. Some of the donations we've received so far are the trophies you can see displayed in the gym foyer from the 1920s, athletic awards from the 30s, a Buckley High School varsity letter from the 40s, game film from the 50s. We've got a Booster Club pin from the 60s, Doug Funk's original scorebooks from the 70s, football and volleyball jerseys from the 80s. We've even got the banners that used to hang in the gym walls. We got a cheerleader uniform complete with pom-poms, and an old light from Sheets Field is sitting in Chris Gibson's office right now. So if you've got an old jersey tucked away in a closet, a couple of game programs you've held on to, newspaper articles or mementos from your high school playing days that your wife wants out of the house, we would love to add them to the artifacts we've gathered as we work to bring our athletic past back for everyone by moving items like these out of boxes on garage shelves and share them with Mountaineer and Hornet fans on nights like tonight. Anything you'd be willing to donate can be dropped off in the athletic office here at the high school. The last and most important thing is this: any Hall of Fame is only as good as the people who are in it. and we're always looking for nominations. We've worked hard on the 23 inductees we have so far, but like I said earlier, we've been competing in athletics since 1905. That means when the football team kicks off against Thomas Jefferson High School next year, we'll begin our 122nd year of athletic competition. So we're well aware that there are many, many more Mountaineers and Hornets whose athletic accomplishments deserve a place in this Hall of Fame, and that's where you come in. We need you to tell us the stories that we need to hear. Everything you need to nominate an athlete, coach, team, or community member who deserves to be considered for this Athletic Hall of Fame can be found in your program. Our next induction night is just a year away, and we'll be meeting soon to begin this work. But first, we really want you to tell us who else deserves to be inducted alongside the 20 inductees we have so far. We look forward to seeing you all back here next year to induct the class of 2026 into the White River Athletic Hall of Fame. Thank you for coming. We've still got lots of cookies over there, so head over there and get some, and then find somebody new and go share your Veltkamp stories. Go Hornets!